you're sitting there, you build your fire, and at first it's bright and you can see everybody's face and you're kind of laughing, you're joking and stuff. But then as that light begins to dim, it's just kind of a silhouette that you see talking, and it kind of gives you this opportunity to reveal yourself and talk about your real vulnerabilities. So we have helped each other through tough situations in life, and we prayed, and pretty soon late at night all you see is maybe the ember of the cigar that the guy's smoking or something. But it's this sanctuary, it's this intimacy, and it's this vulnerability that you can't create anywhere else. And that's ancient, the campfire oral tradition of sharing wisdom.
Hey everyone, and welcome. I am Morgan Giss McDonald, founder and CEO of Paper Raven Books, and I have with us today a super special guest who is the founder of DLS Journey, which is a ministry for men, and the author of the book, The Savage Path, a memoir of modern masculinity. And we're going to get into what that means. And I am super excited to have you here with us, author David Savage.
Well, thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it very much, and appreciate how Paper Raven Books is helping me on this journey.
Yeah, we are here to give you to get the book out to a wider audience, because as you and I have talked about, it's time, for a different kind of messaging for around masculinity, right? And in a broader sense. And so start by telling us like a little bit about the book and who you wrote it for.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's a memoir. I had to choose what kind of book I wanted to write. And so the easiest way was to make it about my life. It's not an autobiography. It's got this overarching theme through it. And that theme is that all men share three common purposes. We have different gifting for specific things, but the three common purposes, I believe anyway, are that every man needs to find a will to obey, and I believe God's will is the best one. I've tried mine and it didn't work out great. They need to find a woman to love, and they need to find a work to do. And so the metaphor of the book is backpacking. And as we backpack through the wilderness, which I have done a great deal of, and there's a lot of personal stories and anecdotes in the book about my backpacking experiences. And a lot of them are pretty humorous because I wanted to make it funny, entertaining, and readable. But I also, there's little morals or little lessons at the end of each chapter where the reader can connect the dots, and there's some little nuggets there from life learning lessons that I'm hoping that they can take away. I try not to make it too explicit or connect those dots for them, but it's there for those who have ears or eyes to hear.
Yeah, so it is a memoir in the sense that you're telling your lived experience.
Yes.
And hoping that it serves as inspiration or maybe even some sort of, instruction if someone is looking for that, in the pages of the book. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. And you asked, who I wrote it for. I wrote it for young men, primarily because, I have two stepsons and a son. And unfortunately, all three of them in their teen years were being raised in a home without their biological father. So I wasn't the custodial parent for my son, same with my stepsons, and they were already well into their teen years by the time they were in my home. And so they were kind of growing up in that critical time of life when you're trying to decide, what kind of man you want to be. When you're 12 or 13, you've kind of heard everything and kind of taken everything from your parents, but you're out there. You're in peer groups and you're kind of experimenting and making mistakes, and what kind of girls you like, what kind of friends you're hanging around with, and you really need a dad, to go to. And one of my favorite quotes is, a boy without a man is like an explorer without a map. And that's really why I wrote the book, because there's a lot of them out there. And, my sons were part of that group that were kind of not getting the coaching and the guidance they need. And women are wonderful, and mothers are needed, but they can't really raise boys to be men. It takes a man to raise a man, in my view.
Yeah. And I think you come at it from a very sort of empathetic standpoint that you're like, look, this was part of my journey in life too, that, this is what my boys ended up with. And maybe wishing it had been different. And so what can we do besides just regret the past? It's like, well, we can do what we can now. So I'm sure, you and your sons have, have a relationship now, and that's sort of shaped this current ministry is what I would guess. Is that kind of?
That's correct. They're, so the youngest is 30. In fact, he just was here this weekend and introduced us to his soon-to-be fiance. And so, it's great because now that they're like, one is 33, one is 35. So they're kind of out there getting bumped around, nicked up by life on their own. And they're kind of thinking maybe he was smarter than we caught on. And they're coming and asking for that advice. And it was available before, but they're angry about things. That's what happens when you are a young man, and then there's a great story that Robert Lewis told. This guy was a fantastic athlete, but he had an alcoholic father. So his father's in the home, but basically disengaged. He goes to try out for football, and he gets ridiculed and made fun of because he doesn't show up to the 8th grade practice with a jock strap because he didn't know he needed one. And it was just humiliating. So fast forward, like, he's an All-American in Arkansas playing for the national championship. And he's like this huge tight end and, not somebody you mess with. And at the bowl game, they have these events, and they have to wear a tie. And he doesn't know how to tie a tie. And he feels like he's that little boy in 8th grade again. And that just makes people angry. And that's why there's a lot of young men in jail, because they didn't get what they needed. And it comes out sideways in unhealthy ways. And so you have to try to fill those holes. Once you become an adult, you can't keep blaming it on your parents. You have to just say, okay, now it's my life. I'm responsible for it. You have to do that introspection and go, okay, I have some gaps, so I'm going to go try to fill them. And maybe with an intergenerational relationship with an older man who may not be your father, but he's willing to coach or mentor you.
Yeah. So I guess when you're out there, talking with young men in your ministry, you work with young men, you in your podcast. So, your podcast is wrestling with the inner man. So y'all talk a lot about these sorts of subjects. What do you feel like the current, and I want to say generations of men, because right, we're really talking about 2 generations of men, right? We're talking about the younger men who are really looking for a mentor or someone to help guide them in their journey. And then we're also talking about maybe your generation, the I don't want to say older, but like the more experienced
yes, the baby boomers
generation of men who maybe are looking back on your lives and saying, gosh, I'm available now. I'm willing now to mentor younger men if they're willing. What do you see these 2 generations really kind of looking for, searching for?
Well, there's a program. It's really how to connect, because I think that there's a unique opportunity right now today, because the cancel culture, has kind of not put men my age, 55 plus year old white men are being dismissed. They're being asked to retire from companies, and that they're not diverse or inclusive enough in their thinking. And that may be accurate. But in the end, those guys know how to run companies. They're young, people are living longer, they're healthier, and they're sitting there saying, I still have something in the tank here. I have something to give. And maybe, people like me that were really, hard chargers, you want to go as far as you can in the company, you didn't pay enough attention to your own kids. And so you'd like to go back and kind of repair that relationship, but it might not be available. So they're looking for someone who's got what they have to offer. And then you have these young men who grew up without fathers, and they've never been fishing. So they don't want to go fishing with anybody because they don't know how to tie a knot, or they don't know, so it exposes them, like the story that I related earlier. And so they just don't do it. And they pick safe areas, or, now they have social media and things, and you just have this kind of a half truth of what your life really is. And there's this real genuine part of you that's kind of isolated and alone. And so the idea is to connect those generations.
And I think there's something special that you do, David, that you really explore in the book. And that is nature, right? Being on a mountain.
Right.
So for you personally, why did you decide to set so much of the book in sort of this backpacking kind of setting? What is it about nature and manhood?
Well, really the whole genesis of the idea for the book came from my grief over what has happened to the Boy Scouts of America. I was richly blessed with a fantastic scoutmaster with great scouting experiences. I went to the National Jamboree. I won't say how long ago, but it was a long time ago. But I got my Eagle Scout Award. I got all the palms. And then, I'm like, okay, I'm interested in girls now. So I'm going to start a high adventure co-ed post, and we'll have a backpacking post. And then I became president of the Explore Presidents Association. And then I was a ranger and a backpacking guide at Philmont. So all of my formational years was heavily influenced by scouting and then being outdoors and all the things that I learned. Every merit badge, was just something else that I was curious about, because I'm an innately curious person. I love learning, and I'm learning about astronomy and soil and water conservation, reptile study. And then my last merit badge, I don't know if you can see it on the wall behind me, but it's actually framed up there because it was an engineering merit badge and I became an engineer. And so it kind of points you. But you have to get away from all the phones and the computers and things, and the earbuds and all that. And you have to get out there and you experience nature. You're experiencing God's creation firsthand. That's real truth. Just yesterday, I was walking, we had some real lousy weather here in Houston. It was cold and rainy. And yesterday it was real sunny, and I was walking around, and there were two baby hawks that were around this big detention pond. And as I was walking around it, they were kind of following me, and just watching those hawks, and I even named one of them Tomahawk, But anyway, you just are out there. There's a little bit of an element of danger, which really appeals to a teenager. It's like because you're testing yourself. Do I have what it takes? Can I zip line, or can I rock climb, or can I go through that white water? And so you're building that self-confidence too, and that's just huge. Because once you do it, I don't know if you've been whitewater rafting. I know you live in Colorado, so I took my whole family, to Salida, and we did the Arkansas River, and there was this hairy falls, whatever, called lunch counter, because you're wiped off of it like a lunch counter. But you pull the raft over and you get out and you walk up there and you look at it, and my kids are all like, man, we're going through that. And yes, but we have a plan, and there's a way to do it. And then if anything happens, we have a rescue plan, and then you go through it. And the exhilaration of actually achieving that, that can never be taken away again. You have that confidence.
In that space of a little bit dangerous, testing myself, do I have the confidence? There's also a spiritual element to your journey and to your work. So how does the relationship with God sort of come into this younger man, older man kind of relationship?
Well, I think, as you're observing creation, you cannot deny that there is a creator. Mm-hmm. You look out there, and then what I like to think of, or if I were to paint a picture for you, when I've been on all these backpacking trips with these older men that I was backpacking with for 25 years, you kind of hike during the day, and people kind of gripe about things or different condition or little camp chores. But then at night, you're sitting there, you build your fire, and at first it's bright and you can see everybody's face, and you're kind of laughing, you're joking and stuff. But then as that light begins to dim, it's just kind of a silhouette that you see talking, and it kind of gives you this opportunity to reveal yourself and talk about your real vulnerabilities. So we have helped each other through tough situations in life, and we prayed, and pretty soon, late at night, all you see is maybe the ember of the cigar that the guy's smoking or something. But it's this sanctuary, it's this intimacy, and it's this vulnerability that you can't create anywhere else. And that's ancient, the campfire oral tradition of sharing wisdom.
Yeah. Guys, if y'all are here with us, you're listening, you're watching, and you're thinking, that's my kind of book. Those are the experiences that shaped me, or that I want to shape me in the future. You can actually grab a free copy of The Savage Path today. So if you go to paperhavenbooks.com/The Savage Path, all one word, and that'll be linked up here next to the video. It'll take you to Amazon. You can grab a free copy of the ebook. If you have someone in your life, a friend, a brother, a father, an uncle, someone in your life who's been meaningful to you, and you want to tag them or share the link to them so that they can go ahead and get a free copy today too, we definitely would recommend that you think about someone in your life who might be this kind of inspiration and for what it means to be a man in your life. So tag them, send them the link, grab a free copy today, even if you're going to read it later. Go ahead and do this while you're here now and thinking about it. paperhavenbooks.com/The Savage Path. And I'm curious for you, David, what was it like to write the book? So you're kind of pouring over all of your own memories and you're thinking about the messages that you really want to communicate around masculinity. What was it like for you to try to combine your life with kind of these messages that were laid on your heart?
Well, I've always been a storyteller, and I've always also been, in professional and sales. And so, in constructing, persuasive speaking, I was very involved in Toastmasters. I actually did amateur comedy nights. And so I've always been a good storyteller. But again, we've talked about kind of the men aspect, but the search for the woman is probably the most important thing because of the divorce in my family. And I want to say probably one of the most surprising things to me is how well the book has been received by women and how much interest there is. I mean, we're talking about men a lot, but women like to understand men, and someone who's willing to kind of put it out there. Some vulnerable things, some sad things that were in my life, I share, in the book. And a lot of it was, it's this will to obey. So when I'm in self-will is when my parents got divorced the year I graduated from college. My brother and my sister all divorced the same year. And I was just really, devastated. And I was, I didn't really know if I ever would be married, because it had that big of an impact on me. I'm the youngest of 4 children. I'd also had a bad breakup when I went off to college. And, and I was really kind of sad for, a semester until I joined a fraternity. And then I, just wanted to focus on my studies and my degree and the mission of why I was at school. I met some really wonderful girls in college. And then if I felt a little vulnerable, I would just cut the relationship off. I hardened my heart. And that was regrettable because those were some wonderful people that I just kind of ended up walling out of my life. And then as I go along, on my path, I'm still trying to avoid being married instead of thinking that God made me or wired me to be with another person. That's the best version of myself. And I didn't understand that until I was 40 years old after a divorce, which I didn't seek. But so I'm real transparent, covering all of this. And after that divorce, which I was just completely surprised by, I said, man, now I'm really, really never going to get married. And and I was angry, but then I had to do this deep introspection where I was like, you know what, I have my responsibility for why it didn't work, and I want to be happy. And I didn't really look at this properly. God wired me to be married, and so what I want to do is be intentional, and I want to have a criteria, and I want to look for a wife, and that's a very attractive man to a lot of women. And so, like in the podcast, we did this 4-part series called Charm School. And it's basically about how to identify, win, and marry the right woman, and then, stay married. So there's 101, 201, 301, and 401. So check out the Charm School podcast. But so those, and then the work to do thing as well. That was always I was just blessed with talent and ability, and my career has always been pretty good. So I didn't have as much trouble in that area. But, where you really get in the wilderness and get lost out there is, when you're in your self-will and you're not really following God's will. And that's kind of where I had the trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is the challenge of writing a memoir, right? Is that people can tell if you withhold a lot, but when you're able to kind of cross that threshold and be more vulnerable and more authentic, I mean, that's why your memoir has so many amazing reviews, is that you really sort of bring the reader in and say, let's walk this journey together. And I feel like that's true of your ministry as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about how your ministry in your DLS ministry that you work with men in these sort of discussions, explorations? Yeah.
Well, I think today people paper up an image on Facebook or Instagram or, even at work, and, everything's going great. No one talks about their bad days. And so, but we all have them. And what you really want is a confidant, your spouse, or, a buddy, another guy that you can go to, because sometimes your wife doesn't want to hear some of the things you're complaining about it, or, you worn her out on that one topic so much about somebody at work or whatever. You just need to go vent, shoot pool with somebody and say, hey, this is what's going on. And then he can hold you accountable, go, that's your own fault because you're being passive. And it takes that. And you really want that. But so I think there's a genuine hunger for just authentic relationships. And I think that the pandemic has made it so much worse. It just, I was in chemical engineering, so we've been just atomized, just blasted apart and pinned down in our homes. And then we even have differences of opinion about vaccinations and masks. You can't see the grandkids, if this is happening within families. So I think right now there's just a tremendous desire and a hunger and an awareness now of community and relationships. And so guys need friends, and we've almost forgotten how to make them, and that the effort that it takes to nurture them, that it requires a little forgiveness, and that you can't always be thinking about what you want out of things. You need to be there for other people. It can't be selfish. And so that's really, a big part of it. And so I'm just trying to model that for people and show them. And I do in the book. I was so blessed to have these 5 older men that I backpacked with for 25 years. And they were all executives in my industry that taught me more about business over those campfires than anything I ever learned. And the only reason I got invited by them was because I was an Eagle Scout. I've been a Philmont Ranger. So I was like the young guy who was a safety valve, who really knew how to do the map reading. And that was just a huge blessing. And I have another group of ski friends like that. And so I've just been really blessed. So the book was really like, this is the way it ought to be. This is the way it used to be. And, gender dysphoria, everything else that's going on, confused young men, are isolated. There's pornography addiction, there's video game addiction, there's just all these things that they're having to deal with that if I was at that age now, I know I'd be struggling mightily with, and they just need a hand up.
Yeah. So good. So I'd love to know, David, you've been through this whole, not only the journey of living the life, but then writing the book, and then having released, launched the book, and now continuing on to promote it, to get it to this wider audience. Is there anything that you have learned? I mean, I'm sure you have learned things, but is there anything especially that kind of comes back to you that you wish maybe you had known when you were younger, like before you sort of started on this journey to become an author, especially?
Well, as it relates to writing, the writing process was actually pretty easy for me. I resigned from my job. I had retired, and then I was recruited out of retirement at a high level. I was a senior director for contracts and commercials for another energy company that had bought a company that was essentially their same size or larger. And they were having all these problems integrating the companies. And, and they were like, hey, we need you. And they were like flattering me. They offered me more money than I had been making, at my old job, which was considerable. And so I was like, hey, it's kind of nice to feel wanted. And so I worked for them for 14 months. And, when the pandemic hit, we started losing all this revenue. We're having to furlough people and lay people off. And I was talking to the CEO, and I said, look, man, I have all this experience. That's why you brought me in. I can solve some of these problems, but you're not listening to me. And I was just working for fun. I'm kind of financially independent. I don't need to work anymore. So I'm resigning. And here I gave him my resignation, and he was just, no, I'll pay you more. I said, it's too late. I'm resigning because it's going to save the job, the 2 people you just asked me to lay off. And he goes, what are you going to do then? I said, I'm going to write a book. And that was in June of 2020. And I began kind of the whole process of investigating. And then I actually wrote it from September to December. But the learning has been social media, which I knew nothing about. I didn't even have a Facebook account ever. LinkedIn, I had an extensive LinkedIn network. And, my daughters helped me, with Instagram and, just graphic, everything's, on the computer, especially because of the pandemic. So, you're just having to learn so much. And what you guys have taught me on the marketing and having, these algorithms and keywords and things that I don't know, this is just complete foreign language to me. So I don't know that I could have known it better, before I started, but just, you got to get on the horse and ride. You can't not do it. And so I think it's about understanding your need for professionals to assist you on this journey. And if you're an indie author like me and you're self-published, you need someone like Morgan in Paper. And then I had used someone in the initial iteration who was also extremely good in helping me, just the writing process. In fact, she made me write the conclusion first. which I was kind of stunned. She goes, you got to write the conclusion first, because you got to know how you're going to land that plane. And then what's your deliverable, to the reader. And so there were a lot of things that I learned about writing that were also interesting, but, not a ton of mistakes, but just learning. And it's exciting, never quit growing, never quit learning, even when you're 61 like me.
That's a good encouragement, I think, for all of us. It's like, if it feels kind of difficult and you're figuring it out as you go, you're probably doing it right.
Yeah. It's a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. And I don't know ultimately where it will go, but I'm excited about this relaunch and about having the marketing plan, which is what really enticed me, to Paper Ravens books.
Yeah. Let's get it out to a wider audience, because I mean, as we talked about, like, not only does this next generation of men maybe need this message around masculinity, but women too. Like we are like kind of defining and redefining masculinity, and to be able to look back at what has worked for like human history is a good idea. And to return back to some like nature and your imagery around the campfire and community, and really like doing this together, and multi-generational. I mean, these are all themes that I think we're yearning to come back to. And so thank you, David, for writing this book, for being vulnerable with your own story, your own lived experience, and hopefully being able to help us kind of navigate our way through masculinity and by extension femininity too, and like why we're here, and our spiritual purpose on this earth. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think my finding, as relative to young women, is that they're very frustrated that there aren't men out there who are serious about committing to relationships. And so there was a need for feminism to achieve many of the goals they did with equal pay. And, now they're shooting the lights out. Women are doing great. And, but men have fallen behind. And like my own daughter, she was like, I can't find anybody that I even want to date, and I think there was a militant aspect of feminism, but that just attacked everything masculine. We need young men, to be strong and to fight evil, and, to do the thing, to be fathers that stand up, for their families and make commitments to marriage. And I think society's recognizing that. And there's been a big recoil and confusion and fog, of like, well, I don't know, it's just a fog. I think that's the best way to describe it. They don't really have a clear vision, and that's it would really help women too if men would be men in a positive, biblical, authentic way.
Well, and I wonder if one of the reasons that women react well to your story and in your memoir is because they maybe don't entirely know how to help a young man lean into his own masculinity, right? How do we support our brothers when we're younger, our boyfriends and husbands when we're a little bit older, our own fathers, if they're still growing in their, like, how do we come up and really be that support system, that partner kind of in that way? And maybe women are kind of looking for that too.
Well, what Wendy, who, she said, look, if a man writes a book about manhood and coming of age or whatever, women will read it. If a woman writes a book, men won't, because they're never going to understand women. And I think so. We kind of give up, but I've really been surprised and pleasantly surprised at the interest. Really, other authors, in our little community have said, hey, I've got some grandsons or sons, or there's a lot of people struggling out there, and I'm going to suggest it, or, this might be something good. And because it's not preachy. It's, in fact, when I talked to Gary Thomas, who wrote Sacred Marriage, and he's been a very successful author, 1 million copies of Sacred Marriage, and he's at our church. And I said, I want to do kind of a ministry book, but it's not going to be too religious or too pious. It's going to be a guy's book. I want it to be humorous. And he said, man, if you have something that's got humor in it like that, that's a unique offering. And, and so there's a lot of humility and humor, and that's what makes it entertaining. And I think how it's been received has been great, because I kind of expected a little bit of a pitchforks and torches in the yard, people like, coming after me on, oh, masculinity, it's all toxic, but that hasn't happened at all.
Oh, that's good. Well, if you guys, again, if you're here with us, you're listening and you're thinking that's the kind of book that I want to read, I want to hand to, my brother or father or uncle or anyone who in your life, or sister, maybe, this is kind of a group journey in a lot of ways for men and for women. So if this is the kind of book you want to read, I encourage you to go grab a free copy today to paperhavenbooks.com/thesavagepath. And that will take you to Amazon. You'll be able to grab a free copy of the ebook. Go ahead and load it out on your Kindle for this weekend or later, but go ahead and do it now while you're here and while you're thinking about it, and tag someone in your life who you think might be interested, or send the link on over to them. We would love to get this out to more and more folks who want to talk about masculinity and what that means in kind of our modern age. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, David. And we will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Morgan. Leave a review too.
And leave a review. That's right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.